I am Colonel Joe Sharkey, the Chief of the Joint Staff of the Minnesota National Guard. I am accompanied by the Installation Chaplain, Major John Shea, and the Camp Ripley Human Resources Officer, Captain Charles Tweeten. It is my honor and sincere pleasure to welcome you to the 2022 Court of Honor Induction Ceremony. At this time, please rise as you are able and remain standing for the entrance of the official party. That will be followed by the playing of the national anthem and the invocation from Chaplain Shea. As this is an indoor ceremony, during the national anthem, please remove any headgear and refrain from saluting. Color guard, post the colors.
Before we started our ceremony today, it was good to hear a bunch of smiling and chatter and just see the handshakes and the opportunity to reunite with a friend. So if you have a thankful heart, you'd like to join me in prayer, let's pray. Father in heaven, we come before you today, and we would ask you'd help us to honor those that have served well. Thank you for this opportunity, Lord. We pray you'd bless the ceremony, to go smoothly, and we would do well to lift high that virtue of honor, duty, sacrifice. Thank you, Father. We ask for your blessings. In your holy name, amen.
Please be seated. Thank you, Chaplain. And thank you, everyone, again for attending this wonderful ceremony today. The Minnesota National Guard has been memorializing individuals since 1993. As stated in General Order Number 5, as a perpetual monument in the memory of a grateful state and nation, terrain features on the Camp Ripley Military Reservation located on Little Falls, Minnesota, are hereby named in honor of Minnesota citizens, now deceased, who served honorably in our armed forces during a time of war. At that time, 159 individuals were honored. Throughout the years, Over several decades leading up to the early 1980s, the program was intermittent, and only 8 individuals, all deceased, were inducted. In 1988, we formalized the program and began hosting induction ceremonies biannually during the even-numbered years. In 2009, the board amended the program to host annual induction ceremonies. To date, over 520 individuals have been honored with their names etched in the granite walls that line the Court of Honor at the Minnesota Military Museum located here on Camp Ripley. There are several distinguished individuals here today, and I would be remiss if I did not take a moment to recognize them. As I introduce the official party and board members present, please stand. The Adjutant General of the state of Minnesota, Major General Sean Mankey. The Chairman of the Memorialization Board, Major General Retired David Elisario. The Command Sergeant Major for the Assistant Adjutant General Army, Command Sergeant Major George Jensen. In addition to the official party, we are joined today by several other Memorialization Board members. The Camp Ripley Senior Commander, Brigadier General Lowell Cruz. The Camp Ripley Garrison Commander, Colonel Joshua Seimer. The Minnesota National Guard Command Chief Warrant Officer, Chief Warrant Officer 5, Brent Jensen. The 34th Infantry Division Command Sergeant Major Stephen Whitehead. The Camp Ripley Garrison Command Sergeant Major Marcus Erickson. Our board recorder, Kathy Raji. Thank you, and please know that we appreciate all the time and work you dedicate to ensuring this important tradition of the Court of Honor continues. In addition to the official party and the Memorialization Board, we have several distinguished guests in attendance today. They include Lieutenant General Brevet Retired Larry Shelto, Major General Retired Gerald Lang, Major General Retired Rick Erlinson, Brigadier General Charles Kemper, Chief Command Warrant Officer 5 Retired Kip Knudsen, and Command Sergeant Major Retired Scott Mills. And additionally, we have with us today from our Air National Guard, Command Chief Lisa Erickson. To any distinguished guests that I have missed, I apologize, and I thank you also for your attendance today. Lastly, can we please take a moment to recognize any past Court of Honor inductees that are in the audience today? If you are present, please stand so you can be recognized. And let's give them a round of applause. We thank you for your dedicated service. The Court of Honor, located at the Military Museum on Camp Ripley, provides a prestigious and visible area for the purpose of recognizing and remembering those individuals who have, through their dedicated service to state and nation, attained uncommon prestige and have performed highly distinguished service over an extended period of years. This year, we recognize the following soldiers whose names are now etched in the Court of Honor. They include Major General Neil Loidolt, Brigadier General Dirk Kloss, Colonel Kevin Olson, Lieutenant Colonel John Ebert, Chief Warrant Officer 5 Peter Panos, Command Sergeant Major Paul Herr, Command Sergeant Major John Lapowski, unfortunately unable to attend today, but is attending virtually. Command Sergeant Major Bruce Stowe, Sergeant Major deceased Wayne Seflow, and finally, Sergeant Diane Busta. Please join the members of the Memorialization Board in honoring these select distinguished soldiers and their families. Let's give them a round of applause.
Our first honoree today is Major General Neil G. Loidolt. Major General Loidolt began his career in 1984 when he enlisted in the Minnesota Army National Guard as an ammunition specialist. He received his commission from the St. Cloud State University Army Reserve Officer Training Corps in May 1987. He has served in numerous staff positions throughout his career and commanded at all levels through division. Some key positions held were Commander and Chief of Staff, 34th Infantry Division, Commander, 175th Regional Training Institute, Director of Personnel for the Minnesota National Guard, Recruiting and Retention Manager for the Minnesota National Guard, and S3, 1st of the 216th Air Defense Artillery. His deployments include Deputy Director of Operations, Iraq Reconstruction Management Office, and United States Mission, Iraq. Chief of Staff, 34th Infantry Division, United States Division South in Basra, Iraq. General Loidolt is a Joint Qualified Officer and Dual Status Commander. He was instrumental in the expedient rise of personnel and training readiness for the newly established 1st of the 216th Air Defense Artillery in Minnesota. He transformed the recruiting and retention culture to one of mission accomplishment. His leadership shaped the success of personnel readiness for the Minnesota National Guard for years to come. He established an innovative approach to system evaluation, and these improvements led to noteworthy changes that directly contributed to medical readiness improvement, resulting in the Minnesota National Guard leading the nation. While serving as the RTI commander, he increased both student throughput and graduation rates, improving readiness and combat preparedness of the Minnesota National Guard formation. He led the team that formed 34th ID staff and functions to deploy to Multi-Division South, Basra, Iraq. Under his direction, he established the 34th as the top Army National Guard division during Warfighter 2014. His consistent mentorship and leadership helped develop leaders at all levels that still serve today. Major General Loidolt and his wife, Cicely, live in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. Cicely is a lawyer at Arthur Chapman, and their son, Sam, is a graduate of the University of Minnesota and serves in the 101st Airborne, currently deployed to Europe. General Loidolt has served as president and CEO of MACV, Minnesota Assistance Council for Veterans, since retirement. This nonprofit organization attacks the mission to end veteran homelessness in Minnesota. He has served as a board member for numerous nonprofit and volunteer organizations. Throughout his career, General Loidolt has led with distinction and made significant impact on the organization and its people. The effects of his leadership are realized today in the readiness levels and performance of Minnesota Army National Guard units and their strong national reputation. Major General Loidolt received numerous military awards and decorations to include the Distinguished Service Medal with 1 Bronze Oak Leaf Cluster, the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star Medal with 1 Bronze Oak Leaf Cluster, and numerous other awards. Major General Loidolt was nominated by Brigadier General Dirk Kloss.
You know, a couple years ago, is this on? On? Hello? Hello, okay. A couple of years ago, Don Kerr stepped up to this podium when he was recognized, sort of visibly, openly moved by the event. And he said, I didn't know what I was gonna feel when I got up here, but I didn't think it would feel quite this good. And I think Don was right. I stand here now in, I think, somewhat in disbelief to be joining the group that has come up to me over the course of today to congratulate me on this. Colonel Seimer said this morning that amongst other things, one of the things today is about is an opportunity to recognize the legacy of the friends and family that have supported you throughout your entire career. And so that's all I'm gonna do with my remarks here today, and send the rest of my time to the command sergeants majors who probably have something better and more important to say than I do. So to all the soldiers and airmen that I served with, thank you. Thank you for that great opportunity. To my friends who are here, John and Brian and Jason at the end, but I can't leave out Diane. Hey, Diane. She's in the midst of us, but otherwise Diane would be sitting over there in the friend row, I think. My family is here, my sister and her husband, my parents who have steadfastly come to everything I've invited them to. They mention this invited them to thing because sometimes I don't always invite them. But they're here today. Sam's in Romania, but he should be on FaceTime or Facebook Live, whatever it's called. So, hey, Sam. Cecily's mom is on the same forum. And so, for those of you who soldiered, when my son found out he was going to get deployed, he had to change the status of his girlfriend. At least he didn't go all the way up to wife. So he's got a fiance now. So to Hannah, who I think is on FaceTime as well, thanks. We're looking forward to you joining the family. And to my bride and her yellow rose, thanks for everything, sweetie. It's a good ride. Thank you.
Our second honoree today is Brigadier General Dirk R. Kloss. Brigadier General Dirk Kloss began his career in 1986 when he enlisted in the Minnesota Army National Guard as a material storage and handling specialist. He received his commission in 1990 through the Reserve Officer Training Corps program at St. Cloud State University. He served in numerous staff positions throughout his career and commanded at the company, battalion, and brigade levels. Some key positions held are Deputy Commanding General of the 34th Infantry Division, Assistant Adjutant General Army, Commander 84th Troop Command, Chief of Staff 34th ID, G3 34th ID, Director of Operations J3, Commander 682nd Engineer Battalion, and Recruiting and Retention Battalion. He deployed with the 34th ID United States Forces South, Basra, Iraq, as the Effects Coordinator. General Kloss was instrumental in developing and executing a transformational customer-first approach. This expanded and improved all Camp Ripley's customers' abilities to meet their training goals and objectives, simultaneously implementing an innovative marketing plan focused on expanding training options for a wide range of civilian agencies without impacting warfighter training. He led 2 demanding battalions in achieving outstanding results in all measurable categories. His leadership improved the readiness of the 682nd Engineer Battalion in an era of repeated combat deployments, simultaneously leading the Recruiting and Retention Battalion to #1 in the nation. He developed, planned, and implemented multiple efficient and effective changes to readiness and mobilization programs that directly improved organizational strength throughout the Minnesota National Guard. He formed, developed, and led a cohesive team that synchronized complex operations. This shaped the operating environment for transition to stability operations for 9 provinces in southern Iraq. He fully integrated and synchronized key leader engagements, G7 and G9 efforts across the operating environment, achieving success in all duties. A soldier, scholar, and diplomat whose leadership, mentorship, and development of young leaders will have a positive impact on the Minnesota National Guard for years to come. Brigadier General Kloss and his family live in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. Dirk is the Vice President of Customer Experience at Park Industries. His wife Morgan is a Vice President of Community Relations and Executive Director of the Land O'Lakes Foundation. Their son Max is a sophomore at Benilde St. Margaret's High School. General Kloss is a current parent volunteer at Benilde St. Margaret's. He was active as a community volunteer for the Minnesota Military Foundation Board of Directors and the Minnesota Army National Guard Memorialization Board. He is a longtime member in conservation efforts such as the Minnesota Deer Hunters Association, Ducks Unlimited, and Pheasants Forever, where he has been a member of the annual fundraising committees. Brigadier General Kloss received numerous military awards and decorations to include the Legion of Merit with Bronze Oak Leaf Cluster, the Bronze Star, Meritorious Service Medal with 2 Bronze Oak Leaf Clusters, and numerous other awards. Brigadier General Kloss was nominated by Major General Rick Erlinson and Major General Neil Loidolt.
Elisario smirked when they said diplomat, so I just wanted to reinforce that it's public record now. Very similar to General Loidolt, really going to focus a lot of comments, as Josh Seimer directed this morning, towards the thank yous to the people in the network that have supported me. Kind of follow along. There's a theme here of things that you get to pick and things that you don't get to pick. And the first thing that I don't get to pick is my family, right? You're born into that, but was very lucky and very blessed to have not only a strong support network there growing up, but a family that cared and taught me a lot about loyalty, and the size of our squad also taught you to function well as a team, and really was a foundational thing in helping me understand organizations and people. Some things you do get to pick. You heard the two nominees that I had. A long time ago, I met Cadet Neil Loidolt, and then a few years later, then Colonel Rick Erlinson, and they turned into mentors for me and examples of leadership, and that turned into a really good friendship, and I'm very thankful for all of that. A thing you don't get to pick is your unit of assignment. And I got a lot of different units of assignment, and each and every time, the accomplishments that they talk about here today really belong to the people in those formations. I was blessed to serve with some people that were very, very dedicated to something larger than themselves and very professional in how they conducted that. Now, the last thing that I did get to pick is standing over here. And I was very, very lucky in the fact that I've been playing outside of my league for quite a few years now. So thank you very much, Morgan, for everything that you have done in making me a better person. And now, Max, you didn't get to pick your parents, but you're lucky that you got them, and we're lucky that we got you. So thank you for everything that you have done to help me, and thank you for keeping me real. Now, time has been something that people have really been focused on here, so I'm going to yield all my remaining time to the sharp-witted public affairs guy that is going to follow. So don't be that runaway retiree, Kevin. Thank you.
Our next honoree is Colonel Kevin A. Olson. Colonel Kevin Olson began his long and distinguished military career enlisting in the U.S. Army Reserve in Fremont, Nebraska as a food supply specialist, and commissioned as a second lieutenant in 1988, graduating from the State Officer Candidate School at Camp Edwards. Transferring to the Minnesota National Guard, he held key logistics assignments until he transitioned to public affairs. He was the primary spokesman for the Minnesota National Guard and the strategic communication advisor to 3 adjutants general from 2003 to 2017. In 2005 to 2006, he deployed to Iraq as a media operations officer for Multinational Corps Iraq, the 18th Airborne Corps. In 2009 to 2010, he deployed a second time, serving as the public affairs officer for U.S. Division South for the 34th ID. Colonel Olson was assigned as a public affairs officer at Joint Force Headquarters in St. Paul in March 2003 and oversaw the enhanced demand for public information during overseas contingency operations. He served as the Director of Communications for the Minnesota National Guard for more than 14 years. He oversaw the Minnesota National Guard's initial entry into social media. He architected the first independent Minnesota National Guard website. He established practices that connected a wide audience with the activities of citizen soldiers, airmen, and families. He provided multiple forums that enabled military print and broadcast journalists to tell the stories of our service members effectively. Colonel Olson co-founded Minnesota Military Radio and developed the program's initial staffing processes and content collection format. Minnesota Military Radio remains on the air today with its host, Tom Lyons. It's one of the premier military radio talk shows broadcasted on 65 Minnesota radio stations. Colonel Olson established a special bond with the St. Paul Civic Group serving our troops and brought them national attention for their mission of serving meals to our soldiers and airmen across the U.S. and Oconus theaters. Colonel Olson broke the code for getting serving our troops into the Army morale, welfare, and recreation program. Colonel Olson's dedication allowed serving our troops to go overseas and serve deployed troops. He innovated the processes for overseas visits by these restaurateurs to cook for deployed service members while connecting with family virtually during the meal. Colonel Olson and his public affairs team have earned prestigious communication industry awards unheard of in the military. These awards include a National Silver Anvil for the Best Nonprofit Communication Campaign in U.S. Government, 4 Minnesota Chapter of the Public Relations Society of America Classic Awards, and a bronze quill from the Minnesota chapter of the International Association of Business Communicators. In addition, Colonel Olson and his team were awarded 5 Emmys recognizing Minnesota National Guard partnerships with Minnesota broadcasters. In 2015, Colonel Olson was named Minnesota Communicator of the Year by his peers in the Minnesota Association of Government Communicators. Colonel Olson serves on the board of directors for the Friends of the St. Paul Library and the Yellow Ribbon Steering Committee for the Minnesota Building and Construction Trades Council. He served as a Concordia University St. Paul adjunct professor in the Strategic Communications Master's Program, and in 2021 was recognized as the university's Distinguished Alumni of the Year. Upon retirement, Colonel Olson founded Snow Globe Public Relations, a veteran-owned firm committed to advancing the efforts of many Minnesota veteran-oriented organizations. Some of Colonel Olson's significant military awards include the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star Medal, the Meritorious Service Medal with 3 oak leaf clusters, and the Joint Service Commendation Medal. Colonel Olson was nominated by Major General Gerald Lang.
Thank you. I want to thank the entire memorialization board. And it's very rare to relish an early morning call from Major General Elisario, but thank you very much for that notification, sir. It's an honor to be among the inductees today, and 3 of whom I have a very close personal connection. First, Major General Loidolt, who, as my chief of staff in particular, served as a mentor, very principled role model that I'm just privileged to have served with you. And for you, Brigadier General Kloss, you have been inspirational and encouraging to me. There was a time during our deployment we were training up, and my qualifications were being questioned, as public affairs was a blood sport, and you stuck up for me more than almost anyone. I could not have had my career had it not been for you. And then also an honoree today, Sergeant Diane Busta, who has been a special partner for events and great trips, and she taught me how to let my imagination be my guide. My career has been crafted around people like this, and I started as a logistician with people like Major General Jerry Lang, who taught me how to be kind and treat people right. Colonel John Dewey, taking the time to do things right. Lieutenant Colonel Jerry Longfellow, who also was an incredible partner, just getting things done. So as a public affairs officer, you have the privilege of telling the story of great people crafted by leaders and the people that I've been around. And so people like Lieutenant Colonel Ebert, Chief Panos, Sergeant Major Herr, Lapowski, and Stowe, you gave me access to your soldiers to speak on behalf of our organization. And people like Sergeant Major Seflow, they set the conditions for our organization to be a success, as did so many of you in this room. I had the same job for 15 years as a public affairs officer. And in that job, I had the great privilege to be a direct report to 3 incredible adjutants generals, General Andriotti, General Shellito, here today, and General Nash. I thank all of our senior leadership for your trust. I also want to have a special thank you to my 34th Red Bull Infantry Division commanders that I served as a public affairs officer, General Erlinson and General Nash. And a special thank you to General Nash, because he challenged me like no one else has ever done before. And I was a public affairs officer in a time of war, both OEF and OIF. And the media, internal, and community relations efforts were unprecedented in the modern communications world. I had the distinct honor of communicating all 18 Minnesota Army National Guard service members who fell. And I was surrounded by the best folks in the business that could honor these soldiers. People like Colonel Denny Shields, Lieutenant Colonel Kristen Auger, Lieutenant Colonel Scott Hawks, Lieutenant Colonel John Hobart, Major Melanie Nelson, Sergeant John Angelo, Sergeant Ben Howe Cooper, Sergeant Joe Roos, who's with us here today. The list goes on. I really relish, though, as it relates to what our organization did, community relations. Because our experience with people, if you put our soldiers and our airmen in front of people, they're going to do the right thing. I thank my great friend Pat Harris with serving our troops and an opportunity to connect like no other organization in the military does with their communities. Great folks like Joe Fowler, who's with us here today representing serving our troops, set us up for success for my military career, my post-military career as running Snow Globe Public Relations. And I'm blessed to have an incredible partner who serves my escort today, Anna Long. And I knew this Lieutenant Colonel Long in 2003 when I reported on my first day as a public affairs officer. I believe I said it to you almost that day, that you're the only person I would ever go into business with. And I'm so grateful to have you as a great partner representing our veteran and military clients today. But as previously mentioned, none of this can be done without family. I'm privileged to be in a family that has served in the Army and the Navy and the Air Force and the Marines. My extended family's Gold Star family, killed in post-World War II security. And in 1989, I had the privilege of having my mother and my father and my sister pin me. I consider that a blessing. They're all gone. Today happens to be my late sister's 66th birthday, and she would be very proud to have my brother Keith and my nephew Matthew honoring the memory of Timothy, who also passed with us here today, just honoring our family and all that the military has meant for me. And finally, love came to me at the age of 50, and I couldn't be more happy to have Christine in my life. So, as all these general officers' primary speechwriter, friends, you have no idea how it feels to come to the end of another brilliantly written and impeccably delivered speech. And neither do I. Thank you very much.
Our next honoree is Lieutenant Colonel John F. Ebert. Lieutenant Colonel John Ebert retired from the Minnesota National Guard in 2001 and then in 2009 from the Facilities Management Office as the Environmental Program Director after working 27 years for the Department of Military Affairs. He graduated from the University of Iowa in 1967. Upon graduation, he joined the Army, commissioned as an engineer officer in 1968, deployed to Vietnam, and honorably discharged from the Army in 1970. John focused on his civilian education and graduated from the University of Illinois in 1972 with a master's in forest, recreation, and planning. John was assigned in the DNR to the Little Falls Forestry District in 1973 after training in St. Paul and Little Fork, Minnesota, during which he advocated to get Camp Ripley placed under DNR forest management. Between 1976 and 1982, John continued to work Camp Ripley Forest Management and increased fire equipment capabilities for the Little Falls District. John joined the Minnesota Army National Guard in 1978. He ended up having an informal and unexpected conversation with General Edward Walden in 1982, where he was encouraged to apply for a new environmental position opening at Camp Ripley. John transitioned from the DNR to the first environmental position created by the Minnesota National Guard. He assisted with Camp Ripley developing its own natural resources department, which led to increased studies on soil erosion, noise, dust, and other impacts to training. John had a large influence and direct impact on the growth of the environmental program in the 1980s and 1990s to include both the compliance and conservation programs. The compliance program expanded to manage the solid and hazardous waste programs, environmental review program, and air and water quality program. He established robust training to educate their soldiers and employees of the Minnesota National Guard about environmental requirements. John established Operation Clean Sweep to collect hazardous and universal wastes in every facility across Minnesota that led to setting up annual site assistance visits for environmental requirements, SAVER, inspections. He also implemented new technologies to help with paint stripping, a building designed specifically for weapons cleaning, and equipment that recycled antifreeze. These new technologies provided both an environmentally friendlier way to deal with waste streams and also provided cost savings to the organization. A multi-vehicle recirculating wash rack was designed and built under the leadership of John. The conservation program grew to manage the natural and cultural resources on lands owned and managed by the Minnesota National Guard. Large research projects studying black bear, gray wolf, and white-tailed deer were implemented. A massive inventory of all natural and cultural resources was completed, showcasing the large diversity of plant and animal life on Camp Ripley. John's leadership led to both the compliance and conservation teams becoming nationally recognized, with over 20 awards in environmental quality, natural resources, pollution prevention, cultural resources, and sustainability. Lieutenant Colonel Ebert received numerous military awards and decorations to include the Bronze Star Medal, the Meritorious Service Medal, the Army Commendation Medal, and numerous other awards. Lieutenant Colonel Ebert was nominated by Major Andrew Ebert.
I am humbly proud to be inducted into the Camp Ripley Court of Honor. Is it on? Should I try this again? I am proud to have been part of both the federal and state sides of the National Guard through the 1980s to 2009, and have worked with most of you that are on this stage and all the people that Colonel Olson talked about. Linda, we've been together for over 52 years. Thank you for your part in raising our 4 children while I was away for many weeks each year, assisting other states or the National Guard Bureau as we developed and implemented policies and procedures to protect our training lands, our facilities, and most important, our people. The National Guard has influenced our children in many ways. Our eldest son, JT, started his military career with an engineer company here at Camp Ripley and recently retired as first sergeant of an engineer company after having returned from his 4th tour to the Mideast. Our second son, Joshua, who's here today, worked at range control at Camp Ripley while in school, and currently is a county emergency planning coordinator and law enforcement training officer. He lives with his family just east of Moorhead. Our third son, Andy, and his wife, Angie, are both officers in the Minnesota Guard and reside in Little Falls with family. Andy, Thank you for your part in making this day possible for me. Your information gathering efforts helped many to understand that the strength of the organization is in its people, as shown here today. Our youngest daughter, Krista, who is also here today, is a media director for a college in Denver, Colorado, and she's leading a team to put together all their classes online. I had a picture that I sent in that I thought they were going to show, and it was a picture of an old deuce and a half type fire truck. So when the Air Guard started flying C-130s aircraft into Camp Ripley on our short field runway, they required a fire crash response team to be on site. So Camp Ripley created a volunteer fire department, manned by men from local fire departments who worked at Camp Ripley. Many came from the maintenance shops and were in the Randall Fire Department. The extreme difference between that picture and what is down the road here a ways is amazing. But that extreme shows you all the things that the Minnesota Guard went through during the 80s and the 90s as Congress passed environmental laws, and we had to figure out how to comply with all these laws. Editor General that time said, no notices of violation, and to try to figure out how to implement all that within an organization of over 10,000 people. Again, I want to thank all those on the board that took their part in putting together this Court of Honor and accepting me as a nomination. Thank you very much.
Our next honoree is Chief Warrant Officer 5, Peter T. Panos. Chief Pete Panos began his military service in the Minnesota Army National Guard in 1994 when he transferred from the Army Reserve. Pete served for 6 years in the United States Marine Corps and completed a total of 12 years in the Army Reserve as a military police officer and Army aviator. He served over 40 years between the 3 service branches. He enlisted into the Marine Corps in 1976 and transferred to the United States Army Reserve in 1982. In July 1984, Pete attended Warrant Officer Candidate School, followed by flight school. During his time in the Army Reserves, Pete's assignments included UH-1 pilot for the Army Security Agency and counter-drug coordinator. In 1994, Chief Panos transferred to the Minnesota Army National Guard and was assigned as a UH-1 pilot for Alpha Company to the 147th Aviation. In 2004, he deployed with the 1256th Med Company as a medevac instructor pilot in support of Operation Noble Eagle and deployed again in 2005 with HHC 1st Brigade in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Pete served as the Brigade Tactical Operation Officer until he was selected to be the BCT Safety Officer. He accompanied over 50 convoy missions to ensure risk mitigation measures for soldier safety, resulting in 20% fewer safety-related accidents. After deployment, he was appointed the Aviation Recruit Sustainment Program Commander until 2011, when he was selected as the 6th Command Chief Warrant Officer for the Minnesota National Guard. He established the Warrant Officer Professional Development Seminar, improving recruitment, retention, and individual readiness of Minnesota National Guard warrant officers, and created branch managers overseeing the developments of each branch warrant officer. He also worked on the Warrant Officer Ranking Board, which provided an order of merit list to decide assignments and promotion opportunities. Lastly, he improved the strength and diversity of the warrant officer cohort. In 2015, Pete was selected as the 7th Army National Guard CCWO, serving as the Senior Warrant Advisor to the Director, Army National Guard. He was responsible for PME, promotion policies, recruiting and retention programs, incentives, strength, and discipline. He championed several initiatives to improve readiness. He worked with the branch proponents to improve the accuracy and efficiency of predetermination packets, resulting in quicker processing times. This allowed states and territories to program more warrant officer candidates to attend their state RTI warrant officer candidate schools. He collaborated with the National Guard Bureau Incentives Branch to improve and expand accessions bonuses to qualified warrant officer candidates in critical low MOSs, which helped several states fill 100% of their warrant officer authorizations. Chief Panos completed his Army National Guard CCWO assignment in 2018. He returned to Minnesota and retired from the Minnesota National Guard on 31 October 2018, having served honorably for 42 years and 3 months. He has remained active serving the veteran community and the Minnesota National Guard. From 2019 to 2021, Pete was a member of the Memorialization Board as the retired warrant officer representative. He also served as the executive director for the National Guard Association of Minnesota from October 2019 until September 2019. He began visiting Twin Cities cemeteries and provides care and maintenance for neglected veteran headstones and markers in the spring of 2021. He was an active life member of the National Guard Association of Minnesota, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the American Legion, and is a master mason. Pete and his spouse, Marcia, reside in Chisago City, Minnesota, but can be frequently found in California visiting their daughter and granddaughter. Chief Panos received numerous military awards and decorations to include the Distinguished Service Medal, Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star. Chief Panos was nominated by CW5 Brent Jensen.
All right, I have a speech, but it's short. This will be short. As anyone knows, I really dislike speaking in front of groups. Chief Podratz, quit rolling your eyes. As you may have heard, the Court of Honor recognizes individuals for distinguished service with distinguished service records. I believe that what it really does is recognize the individuals as the face for all the enlisted, NCOs, warrant officers, and officers who, through their support and guidance and their accomplishments, have allowed us to have outstanding military careers. Thank you, Chief Jensen, for nominating me, and thank you, General Elisario and the Memorialization and Court of Honor Board for selecting me to represent all those who've mentored me, supported me, and kept this warrant officer on track for the last 42 years. If I started naming everybody that helped me in that time, we'd be here all night long. Because as a warrant officer, you really do get to touch a lot of lives, and it's an amazing career and career choice for me. But I'd be remiss if I did not thank my wife, Marcia, for all the support, understanding, and the sacrifices that she's gone through my career. Now, this is better, because now I'm going to tell you a story. So, Colonel Olson, when we deployed to Iraq, had set up this really cool thing for the Minnesota Wild, where we could do an interview, and they'd show it on the big screen, right, at the Wild game. So I got interviewed as the senior warrant officer under deployment, and I do my interview, and I tell Marcia, hey, I'm going to be at the Wild game, and she goes, oh, great, they invited me. I'm going to go there with she invites her whole family. They get there. I give that comes up on the screen. Now, I don't realize I've done this, but I talk for like a minute, and I don't mention her once. Exactly. Needless to say, the next time I talk to her on email is, I'm really not happy with you right now. So I make sure now that I do. I also want to say thank you to my daughter, Christina, who's in California with my granddaughter. We spent a lot of time away from each other. We lost a lot of time together, And I'm really glad that we've been able to try to make some of that time up. So you may wonder why I'm wearing my uniform today. I didn't have to, but 3 reasons. The first is I fit in it still. So I'm pretty happy. The second is out of pride as a member of the Army's greatest technical experts at the tactical point of execution, and that's a warrant officer cohort. I've never been, this is the most proud I've ever been as a warrant officer. It's the most challenging, engaged career someone could ever have. And third, it's out of respect for each and every one of you who is still serving this great state of Minnesota and our nation as citizen soldiers. You know, the concept of citizen soldier is the very foundation of our country's military. It's how our country got the military started. The citizens of this country have the most trust and faith in their National Guard units of any military unit. And I know that for a fact because when we were in D.C., we would talk about this when we'd sit down with regular Army officers, and they'd talk about the National Guard and the trust they have with their citizenry. And it's that trust and respect that our citizens have for us that make me so proud to be a Minnesota National Guardsman, especially in our state. I'm going to end with this last thing. It's a quote from Albert Schweitzer. "I don't know what your destiny will be, but one thing I do know. The only ones among you who will truly be happy are those who have sought and found how to serve. It gives us great opportunity to make a difference in people's lives and improve the world we live in." Thank you.
Our next honoree is Command Sergeant Major Paul E. Herr. Sergeant Major Herr's distinguished 33-year career began on 30 June 1982 when he enlisted in the United States Army following graduation from high school. He served as a heavy equipment operator and a machinist while stationed in West Germany, Korea, and Fort Drum, New York, until 1991. He received an honorable discharge from active duty after attaining the rank of Staff Sergeant. Immediately following his discharge from the active Army, he enlisted in the Minnesota Army National Guard as an M60A3 armor crewman assigned as a tank commander in Delta Company, 1st of the 94th Armor, Grand Rapids, Minnesota. His leadership capacity was recognized and his responsibilities grew rapidly. He was promoted to platoon sergeant in May 1998, followed by selection as company first sergeant in November 1998. In 2003, he was promoted to sergeant major and assigned as the operations sergeant major for the 1st of the 94th Armor, Duluth, Minnesota, serving as the battalion operations sergeant major through the battalion's deployment to Bosnia in 2003 to 2004. In 2004, he was appointed as command sergeant major, 1st of the 194th Armor, Brainerd, Minnesota, until fall of 2008 when he was appointed and assumed the duties as the brigade command sergeant major, 1st Brigade, 34th Infantry Division. His years of experience was instrumental in reducing the high attrition rates attributed to the 22-month-long mobilization and deployment to Iraq in 2005 to 2007. His tactical and technical knowledge of military operations provided the NCO Corps of the brigade guidance and direction to take the lessons learned from the previous brigade deployment and apply them to its upcoming pre-deployment training. This required direct and determined leadership from him and his team of 7 battalion command sergeant majors, ultimately setting the brigade up for its successful and historic deployment to Kuwait and Iraq. His great concern for soldier welfare led the effort of enforcing more robust soldier counseling, coaching, and resiliency, emphasizing the impact that first-line leaders had on soldier welfare and well-being during a time when soldier suicides were rising. He was one of the first to recognize that personal relationships were the most effective defenses against emotional challenges. He worked to reduce the stigma of seeking mental health treatment. The message that seeking help was not a sign of weakness resonated within the brigade. He made the NCO Corps of the brigade the drivers of a safety-first mentality. 1st Brigade successfully accomplished what many believed the impossible by bringing home alive all 4,100 soldiers. This was in great part due to his tireless focus on pre-combat inspections and the rigid enforcement of the standard. The brigade mission after Iraq changed to becoming the Rapid Reaction Force for all of CENTCOM from Kuwait. He knew the challenges from previous deployments regarding redeployments and immediately began working to avoid high attrition rates from previous deployments by focusing on leader capacity, resiliency, and employment for soldiers once they returned home. 1st Brigade did not face high attrition rates after the 2011 to 2012 deployment and remained #1 nationally in all key readiness indicators for the next 7 years. In Sergeant Major Herr's last assignment, he served as the G5 Sergeant Major for the 34th Division. In this capacity, his knowledge, experience, and tactical background was instrumental in preparing for and executing the 2014 Division Warfighter exercise with great success. Command Sergeant Major Herr was an integral part of this success by building an exceptional G5 team, as well as the systems needed for the commanding general to make timely decisions. He and his wife Erica live in Hibbing, Minnesota. They have 4 children, daughters Autumn, Natalie, who's currently serving active duty in the U.S. Army, Riley, and son Levi. Paul is employed by the Minnesota Department of Health as supervisor for the Northwest region. He continues to support his community while serving as a youth wrestling and karate coach. Command Sergeant Major Herr received numerous military awards and decorations to include the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star Medal, the Army Commendation Medal with 2 Oak Leaf Cluster, and numerous other awards. Command Sergeant Major Herr was nominated by Colonel Eric Kurska, Command Sergeant Major Douglas Julien, and Command Sergeant Major James Capson.
Okay, I've been warned. This is quite the emotional roller coaster. Yes, even for me, those who know me. In 1985, I was a specialist at Fort Hood, active duty. And maybe my demeanor, those that have worked with me over the years, this may explain some things. C-130 crashed on North Fort. At the time, those M1s were kind of new. My unit was the only unit that had Oshkoshes at the time. Unfortunately, I was a driver for one of those. Seeing how things were a little bit scattered, they decided to deploy me and 2 other drivers with Oshkoshes to help with the cleanup. Not really something that would happen today. We deployed to site. The site was cordoned off. Zones kept. We were collecting bags. We had personal effects in those bags. One of the personal effects in those bags was an airman from Minnesota who died in that crash. At that time, I did not make a decision to stay in full time. At that time, I decided I was going to stay in full time. I made a decision that when I had soldiers someday, that I would bend over backwards to make sure that they were trained, no matter how painful that was. That ultimately, my job was to make sure that they were skilled and they come back. That's the only thing I ever strove for. I didn't care whose feelings I hurt, as many of you in here know. I I'm just a man. I did not do this. I did not get here by myself. I read this and I look at that stare on that picture. I have to thank everybody in this room. I invited lots of people to this, just because I have so many people to thank for this. Sergeant Major, Lapowski can't be here. He was just a fantastic Sergeant Major. Sergeant Major Bruce Stowe. Just James Campson. I had great NCOs to work with. I had great commanders to tolerate me, because that's what it took to make sure that we did the things that we needed to do, to make sure that soldiers were trained to the best of their ability, that soldiers came home alive. Because those personal effects of that airman included his wife and a family of 2 pictures. He wasn't coming home again. And as selfish as that may seem, I did not ever want to have to go through that. I didn't want to have to be that guy to lose a soldier. And some of us in here have sweated that, have gone through that, have had to deal with that. We've lost family, we've lost friends. My job was to be a sergeant major. My job was to make sure that my commander's troops were trained to their best of their ability. I want to thank my family, my friends, my commanders of the past that are here. Eddie Frizzell, first commander. I was the first commander. I was the first sergeant. That was my first commander, Eddie Frizzell. And we came out of that sweet. Jeff Turner. Colonel Kurska. I have so many people here that made me look good. Because it isn't about me. I can only give guidance. I can only give my opinion. General Lang, I didn't get the memo on being nice. Because those are the things that were important to me. I have a family. I have friends. Everybody needs to come home to that. I couldn't have done the job that I did without the support of the generals in this room, General Shellito. General Loidolt tolerated me. General El Rosario wanted to kill me a couple of times. And I'm overwhelmed by being able to stand here and see so many faces that I worked with for so many years. And more importantly, my family, my friends, my beautiful daughters, one, Autumn, who's in Utah. If you're watching, I love you. Riley, Natalie, Staff Sergeant Herr, Hua, Levi, and my beautiful wife, Erica. I couldn't have done this without you. You're the best wife a guy could have. So with that, I thank everyone for coming. And the party? No, okay. So I thank you. I thank you for this great honor, and have a great day.
Our next honoree is Command Sergeant Major John M. Lapowski. He and his family are unable to be with us today. Command Sergeant Major John Lapowski began his military career on March 18, 1982, by enlisting as a private in Charlie Company, 1st of the 136th Infantry in Sauk Center, Minnesota. He attended one station unit training at Fort Benning, Georgia. He oversaw numerous reorganizations during his career, beginning with a transformation from a light infantry battalion to a mechanized infantry battalion in 1997. In 2000, he led the transformation of the 1st of the 194th from mechanized infantry to armor. In 2005, he oversaw the transition of the 1 of the 194th from an armor to a combined arms battalion. In 2003, he was selected for First Sergeant of Alpha Company, 1 of the 194th Armor in Wadena, Minnesota. In this position, he built a cohesive team for an upcoming deployment. He mobilized a composite 152-person security company to Fort Dix, New Jersey for pre-deployment training and further deployment to Iraq as part of Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation New Dawn. Apache Company performed admirably during the deployment, completing all objectives as the war transitioned from offensive to stability operations. His leadership of Apache Company received accolades from leadership, home, and abroad. Most importantly, he brought all of his soldiers home from the deployment. Once again, he spearheaded another unit reorganization as the Operations Sergeant Major for the 1st of the 194th Armor Battalion. Additionally, 1st of the 194th Armor transitioned from armor pure to a mechanized and armor combined arms battalion. His experience as an infantryman and armor crewman allowed him to assist commanders in a smooth transition, including developing training plans and gunnery sequences to meet their requirements. In 2008, he was selected as the battalion CSM for the 1st of the 194th Battalion Bastards of Bataan, leading to their deployment in 2010. Their mission was to escort equipment and supplies from Iraq to Kuwait, driving thousands of miles without serious incidents. Again, CSM Lapowski's leadership style and desire for perfection were shown during the Iraq drawdown. In 2015, CSM Lapowski was selected as the 1st of the 34th ABCT CSM. The brigade faced the daunting task of transitioning from a 14-year-long focus on counterinsurgency operations to a focus on full-spectrum operations, i.e., the mechanized and armor battalion. CSM Lapowski quickly tackled that, ensuring that the BCT soldiers had a strong foundation of individual and crew-level skills. He reached the pinnacle of his career when he was selected as the 34th Infantry Division Command Sergeant Major. During his tenure as Division CSM, units from the Red Bull Division participated in multiple deployments across the globe, multinational overseas training events, joint training exercises, and combat training center rotations. His input on the changes profoundly impacted how enlisted soldiers in the Army National Guard are promoted. He tirelessly promoted the Minnesota National Guard and the 34th Infantry Division locally and federally. During his time as Division CSM, they became the #1 and #2 combat arms battalions in the entire Army National Guard. CSM Lapowski resides with his wife Laura in Sauk Center, Minnesota. He is the owner-operator of Lapowski Trucking, conducting landscaping projects throughout the area. He occasionally leases onto a general road contractor conducting projects on county and state roads throughout Minnesota. He is an active member of the American Legion Post 67 and VFW. He continues to volunteer his time and material for various entities. His dedication to service extends beyond the military as he continues to donate his time and equipment to public access in and around Sauk Center. Command Sergeant Major Lapowski received numerous awards and decorations to include the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star Medal with 2 oak leaf cluster, the Army Commendation Medal with 1 oak leaf cluster. Command Sergeant Major Lapowski was nominated by Master Sergeant Brent Henry. Can we please give him a round of applause? Our next honoree is Command Sergeant Major Bruce L. Stowe. Command Sergeant Major Bruce Stowe served for more than 34 years in the Minnesota Army National Guard from March 1979 to April 2013. He enlisted in 1979 and was assigned to Det 1 Echo Company, 682nd Engineer Battalion in Northfield, Minnesota, as a bridge crewman. He rose to the rank of sergeant quickly and subsequently served in every NCO position from team leader to command sergeant major. His role as first sergeant was with HHB, 1st of the 126th ADA. He was Operations Sergeant Major for the 34th Infantry Division and Joint Force Headquarters. In 2004, Sergeant Major Stowe provided guidance to over 50 enlisted and 10 officers within the JFHQ plans, training, and operations areas. He supervised and managed a budget of approximately $50 million, supporting state programs that included annual training, NCOES, duty MOSQ, joint operations, and state active duty missions. His management of the state's duty MOSQ efforts resulted in a 93% efficiency rating, which exceeded the national average and moved the state from 26th to 18th place. CSM Stowe was a key member of the state's first dual status command joint task force, which was established in 2008 for the Republican National Convention. He managed a high-functioning operations center that set the standard for future support to civil authorities. His role as CSM was with the 1st of the 34th BSTB. His career culminated when he deployed to Kuwait in 2011 to 2012 in support of Operation New Dawn. He was the CSM for the 1st of the 34th BSTB and Camp Arifjan Zone 6 Command Cell. He provided incredible NCO leadership to 7 arson theater reserve units, 3 EOD teams, 2 engineer dive detachments, and 2 chemical companies. These organizations conducted numerous military operations throughout the CENTCOM area of responsibility, to include Iraq, Afghanistan, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, Kuwait, and Jordan. CSM Stowe also focused on getting the battalion better in the areas of duty MOSQ, NCOES, and attrition. In CSM Stowe's eyes, the most important accomplishment was to bring everyone safely home after completing the mission. He currently works for the Department of Veteran Affairs as a finance and accounting specialist, focusing on veteran benefit debt waiver requests and other financial concerns for veterans. He's an active member of the Northfield VFW Post 4393, where he served as the post commander from 2016 to 2018. He serves as the post adjutant and on the post house committee. Bruce is a member of the Northfield Veterans Memorial Park Committee, overseeing management of the park, focusing on repairs, improvements, and name recognition through paver and placement. He is a co-chairman and planner for the Memorial Day ceremonies and volunteers his time to landscaping the park when needed. Bruce and his wife Kimberly live in Northfield, Minnesota. He enjoys spending time at the cabin, deer hunting, being a grandfather, and traveling. His outstanding leadership and dedication to everyone around him continues years after his military service. Command Sergeant Major Stowe received numerous military awards and decorations to include the Legion of Merit, the Meritorious Service Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters, and the Army Commendation Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters. Command Sergeant Major Stowe was nominated by Command Sergeant Major James Caspin.
I'm very grateful for this nomination and induction into the Court of Honor. Thank you, General Mankey, and the Memorialization Board for this privilege. I was truly blessed to work with and for so many fantastic officers, non-commissioned officers, soldiers, and civilians over the course of 34 years in the Minnesota National Guard. The 27 years I served full-time with the Minnesota National Guard were very challenging, but extremely rewarding. There's so many people I wish I could thank today. We just simply don't have enough time, so I just simply say thank you. I do wish to thank my family for attending today, my wife of 40 years, Kim, my son, Sergeant First Class Darren Stowe, daughter-in-law Andrea, you might have to read this. My grandkids, Andrew, Emily, and Samantha are here. My daughter, Lauren, and fiance, Chris. My grandson, Mason, and special guest, Finn. My brother, retired Sergeant Major Tom Stowe, his wife Bonnie, and their son Jared. Lifelong friend and retired Colonel Kevin Larson and his wife Lori. I'd like to thank retired Command Sergeant Major Jim Campson and Command Sergeant Major Steve Canine for the nomination. I truly appreciate it. It's an honor for me to be here. Your mentorship, your friendship, your advice, and sometimes your jokes, very much appreciated. I'd like to thank Command Sergeant Major retired Scott Mills, Command Sergeant Major retired Doug Wortham for the years we worked together, your advice, and your friendship. As I mentioned, there's so many people I wish I could thank today, but I do want to particularly thank the following officers for giving me the opportunity to serve at the next level. Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Johnson, Major Jason Burley, Colonel Geraldine Longfellow, Colonel Don Kerr, and General Dirk Kloss. I wasn't sure if he's here. Is Ken Johnson here today? Retired Colonel Ken Johnson? I'd like to single out Colonel Johnson, who gave a snot-nosed buck sergeant a chance back in 1985 and hired me as a production recruiter in Northfield, Minnesota. We later crossed paths at the 34th Infantry Division headquarters, and again when he served at the State Joint Force headquarters in the J3 training section. You told me, sir, on a few occasions to sprint to the finish because you never know what's going to happen. And those are sound words of advice, sir. Again, thank you. I'm humbled, and I'm deeply honored.
Our next honoree is Sergeant Major Wayne R. Seflow. His family is unable to be with us today. Sergeant Major Wayne Seflow enlisted into the Minnesota Army National Guard on 13 April 1981 and served for over 34 years. Sergeant Major Seflow served in all 3 artillery battalions within the Minnesota Army National Guard. The 1st of the 175th Field Artillery Battalion, the 1st of the 151st Field Artillery Battalion, and the 1st of the 125th Field Artillery Battalion. Wayne entered active duty service as an AGR soldier in December of 1990 and finally retired in September of 2015 as the 34th ID G3 Operations Sergeant Major. He held numerous key positions during his career, such as Training NCO, Readiness NCO, Assistant Operations NCO, Battalion Operations NCO and NCOIC, 84th Troop Command Brigade Operations NCO and NCOIC, and 34th Infantry Division Senior Operations NCO. While at the 34th Infantry Division headquarters, Sergeant Major Seflow helped plan and execute numerous division exercises such as Warfighter 14-5, Talisman Sabre 15, and Yamasakura. Sergeant Major Seflow deployed to Iraq from 2005 to 2007 as the 1st of the 125th Field Artillery Battalion Operations NCO at Camp Scania, where he earned the Bronze Star and Combat Action Badge. Sergeant Major Seflow also earned the Legion of Merit, the Meritorious Service Medal, 2 Army Commendation Medals, and 2 Army Achievement Medals during his career. Sergeant Major Seflow planned and participated in 2 NATO Composite Force missions to Norway as a part of the 1st of the 125th Field Artillery Battalion. He also served the state of Minnesota on several state active duty missions, the most notable being 9 days in the Red River Valley during the historic flooding in the spring of 1997. Upon his retirement from the military, Wayne remained active with veterans organizations, the Field Artillery Association, and the Minnesota Army National Guard. He continued to provide mentorship and counseling to soldiers and other veterans. On January 6, 2018, Wayne and his wife Julie had a house fire at their farm near Lake Lillian, Minnesota. Tragically, Wayne passed away in the house fire. It is not certain if he was searching for his son Zach and granddaughter Ilea, not knowing they had already escaped along with his wife, Julie. Sergeant Major Wayne Seflow provided faithful service to the Minnesota Army National Guard for 34 years in both peace and war. He served in numerous positions of great responsibility. He inspired, trained, and mentored countless soldiers and improved every organization in which he served. In light of these examples, Wayne is deserving for induction into the Camp Ripley Court of Honor. Sergeant Major Seflow was nominated by Command Sergeant Major Anthony Santola. Let's please give him a round of applause. Our final honoree today is Sergeant Diane M. Busta. Sergeant Diane Busta enlisted in the Minnesota Army National Guard as a junior in high school on 16 December 1977. She left for basic training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, immediately following high school graduation on 4 June 1978. Upon completion of basic training, she went directly to advanced individual training, also at Fort Jackson, and graduated in August of 1978. Upon her return from initial training in 1978, she served as a material supplyman with Foxtrot Company, 747th Maintenance Battalion at Camp Ripley, Minnesota. In 1981, she completed the legal clerk course at Fort Ben Harrison, Indiana. She was then assigned to Alpha Company, 747th Maintenance Battalion at Camp Ripley. In 1983, she was assigned to the Army National Guard training site at Camp Ripley, where she served until April 1990, when she was transferred to the USAR control group to take care of family issues, including high-risk pregnancy. In 1994, she was reappointed to the Minnesota National Guard as a clerk typist with HHD Stark in St. Paul. She remained in that position until her retirement in August 2003 with 20 years of service. In addition to her years of military service, she was a state of Minnesota employee for the Department of Military Affairs. She began at Camp Ripley on 2 January 1981. A relocation to the Twin Cities in October of 1990 prompted a position change to the military personnel section at the Adjutant General's office, and ultimately a transfer in 1993 to the Department of Military Affairs Executive Director's office as an administrative assistant, where she remains today with a total of over 40 years of service to the Minnesota National Guard and the state of Minnesota. As an administrative assistant, she has led and supported numerous high-profile activities, including over 20 colonel or higher promotions, over 20 command sergeants major and general officer retirements, and handling significant portions of legislative liaison events. Her community involvement and civilian leadership includes 17 years as president of the Coon Rapids Snowflake Association. This is a nonprofit organization which provides an annual 3-week winter celebration in her hometown. She served as director of the Coon Rapids Junior Royalty Program for 15 years, providing the opportunity for hundreds of local children, ages 5 to 15, to serve as a community ambassador throughout the state. She has been involved for 15 years at the local and state level of the Miss America program, the nation's largest provider of scholarships for young women. She is a charter member of the Coon Rapids North Star Lions Club, established in 2004, holding numerous board and leadership positions. She is also a board and founding member of the Coon Rapids Community Strength Foundation, a nonprofit organization that promotes and enhances the quality of life in her hometown with support of community celebrations and events. Sergeant Busta received numerous military awards and decorations to include the Army Reserve Component Achievement Medal with 3 Oak Leaf Cluster, Army Achievement Medal, the Humanitarian Service Medal, and the Minnesota Good Conduct Medal. Sergeant Busta was nominated by Major General Neil Loidolt.
Well, they saved the best for last, right? Just kidding, just kidding. First of all, I want to thank Major General Loidolt for nominating me for the Court of Honor and to the board for selecting me. This is something that I've peripherally been involved with and known about for many years, and would have never dreamed that I would be on this stage today accepting this honor, and especially since I started my military career right here at Camp Ripley over 44 years ago. So this is something I will never forget. I'm really nervous. I'm usually not like this. I'm so humbled and honored to share the stage and this award with the top-notch military soldiers that were nominated this year. So I feel pretty special about that. I'm proud to say that I was a 42-plus year employee of the Minnesota National Guard and the Department of Military Affairs. 20 of those were in uniform. I didn't read over my bio very good, I guess, before I sent it in because I'm no longer employed. I'm retired now and loving every minute of it. I have to say, in all the years, the people that I've worked with, from enlisted up to our general officers, I've had many mentors, many role models. Probably the best time of my career was all the general officers I supported over the last 15 years, many of who are in this audience today, matter of fact. In my opinion, Minnesota has second to none the best GOs in the military today. And I appreciate all the opportunities I was given and all the mentorship I was provided. And last but not least, I'm going to make this short, my family means the world to me. When my husband, Jack, and I both served for a number of years together, and he was deployed to Iraq in 2007, 2008, and my National Guard family really stepped up for my kids and I and made sure that for that year that he was gone, that we had everything we needed and that we were well taken care of. And I'm sure that made Jack feel good, and I appreciate his support and all the love that he's given me over the years. My children are here. My son John and his daughter, or his wife Amber, thank you. His fairly new wife, Tiffany, my daughter, and her husband John, thank you for being here. And Jack's family, my family, his sister Jill and her husband Bob, thank you. And my mother-in-law, who spent many years in mine and Jack's early military careers taking care of those babies. So I love you more than you know. And my brother-in-law, Jeff, thank you. My friends who drove a long way from the cities, to some of us that's a long way nowadays that we don't have to do it every day. Thank you, Legates, for being here, and Amanda, and any other friends that I have here, many friends here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for this honor. Thank you for supporting me and mentoring me all these years. I really appreciate it.
Well, please join me in one last round of applause for all of our inductees today. At this time, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome to the podium our chairman of the Memorialization Board, Major General Retired David Elisario.
Good afternoon. It's an awesome responsibility that the board bears to ensure that the standards are upheld each and every year. For the past members of the board, you understand that. I think today I can look to the Adjutant General and to everyone else here and say, sir, the board has done its job. I'd like to recognize and thank those individuals that played a significant role in making this distinguished event happen. In particular, the Memorialization Board for accepting and working through the nominations and spearheading this event. I need to thank the state headquarters staff and of course our guiding light through all of that, Kathy Raji, who keeps us on task and sometimes more importantly on schedule. A special thank to Lowell Cruz and his great staff here at Camp Ripley, who work behind the scenes to make today's event as special as it is for all of those inducted and for those of us that participated. To the friends, families, and soldiers here today, thank you for coming and making this a special day for those that have been inducted. Thank you.
Thank you, General Elisario. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the benediction and remain standing for the exit of the official party.
If you'd like to join me in a word of thanks, let's pray. Father, again, we come before you. We know in the book of James it says you're the giver of every good gift. And that's aptitude, that's upbringing, that's character. And a lot of that was displayed today. So we thank you for all the blessings that you've given to these people that we honor. We thank you for what you've done for us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes this portion of the memorialization program. I ask you to please join us at the museum for the unveiling ceremony of this year's honorees into the Court of Honor. The unveiling will take place at the museum and will begin promptly at 2:45. For those that are joining us online, we'll take a short intermission and be back at 2:45 to unveil the inductees. We have reserved parking for the honorees and official party in the museum parking lot. Parking is also available along the west side of Infantry Road for all other attendees. Thank you for attending today's ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, please gather around. We'll begin momentarily once we get all the inductees here. If I could get the inductees up front in a horseshoe so I can do a roll call.
Where you want us, Chief?
I just want so I can see you.
Count it for me.
That's General Oil. Do we have Lieutenant Colonel Ebert?
Right here.
Oh, right there. Thank you, sir.
Just ask me, Joe. I'll let you know. You're making the job harder than it needs to be, Joe.
Sir. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us here for the unveiling ceremony. I'd like to thank General Mankey and General Elisario up here today. Honorees, when we call your name, please come forward. You will remove your tape from your name, and you will receive your plaque. At this time, can I call forward Major General retired Neil Loidolt?
Joe, is this where we pause for the thing they talked about?
You get to be whoever you want to be.
Good job, Sergeant. Take a step over there. Right in the middle, Neil. Cool. Let's give him a round of applause. Next, if I could call forward Brigadier General retired Dirk Kloss.
And I should take the next one.
We'll find out, sir.
Diane Busta.
Next, if I could call forward Colonel retired Kevin Olson. Lieutenant Colonel retired John Ebert. Chief Warrant Officer 5, Peter Panos. That was my best, too. That's because I'm your best warrant officer. Thanks, Chief. Command Sergeant Major Paul Herr. this time, Command Sergeant Major George Jensen will remove the name for Command Sergeant Major John Lapowski. Let's give him a round of applause. Command Sergeant Major retired Bruce Stowe. You're welcome. Command Sergeant Major George Jensen will come forward and we will remove the name tape for Sergeant Major deceased Wayne Seflow, and we will have a moment of silence. Thank you, Sergeant Major. And finally, Sergeant retired Diane Busta. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the unveiling ceremony. Please join me in one more round of applause for our honorees today. I'd like to thank everyone for taking their Sunday afternoon to attend this event. As the ceremony concludes, you can stay and mingle. What we would ask is before the inductees disperse and depart, if they could come forward up to the granite plaque here for a group photo before we end today. Thank you.
Your name's in granite and you're alive. That's fabulous.
I started at camper plane, I ended at camper.
Oh my God.
Wherever you like, son.
What you playing, Sergeant?